don't know how to go from that to Beyonce, but my questions are about Beyonce just released her new album, and there's a song on there that uses an ableist slur. She's since apologised. She's since changed the wording of the song and re-released it. My question's to you, Hannah. Artists like Lizzo and Beyonce, when they do things like this, do you think it's good enough that they just apologise, quickly make a change and re-release that song?
I was waiting for this. They warned me it was coming and I was still waiting. So, look, I really wish, obviously, that they hadn't released the song with the slur in the first place. That would mean I wouldn't have had, and so many other disability advocates wouldn't have had to expend our emotional labour explaining why the slur is not cool and why it should be taken out. And it would probably also mean that my Twitter mentions weren't as much of a dumpster fire as they are right now, but that's okay. Look, I really respect Lizzo and Beyonce for apologising. I think that's a great move because I think we have definitely seen it before when celebrities do that whole, I'm going to double down, that's not what I meant, you just took it the wrong way, blah, 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 blah. And both of these women who, it has to be said, occupy incredible spaces as marginalised people themselves, have shown everyone around the world how to be an effective ally. And that's basically be open to learning, go, okay, cool, I did something wrong, now I'm going to just fix it and we're not going to make a huge fuss about it. I just wish the people who are really passionate about the fact that Beyonce and Lizzo had to change the lyrics in their song would get that message, because I actually debated whether or not to bring this up because I have a lot of people that I care about watching and people who care about me, and they don't quite know the level of trolling I've got this week. But I have had people basically sending me photos of, or like GIFs of people in wheelchairs falling over, people in wheelchairs being pushed off cliffs, you know, all that kind of stuff, which basically is telling me to shut up and go away. But luckily, I'm not very good at listening to that, so.
Good on you. Sorry to hear that. Good on you. Hannah, when you hear something like that, and you were very generous and gracious in talking about Beyonce and taking it down, but when you hear something like that, what is the feeling? What is the reaction?
The feeling in the Beyonce case was a lot of confusion and a lot of hurt that I think went deeper than Lizzo, because I couldn't work out how she'd missed the conversation we had 6 weeks ago, because it kind of went around the world. And I wasn't really sure how someone on Beyonce's team missed that memo that if they kept that word in the song, they were going to run into the same problem. I don't know if they thought, like, she's called it out once, she won't dare call it out again. But trust me, I can and I will every time. So I think it's just a lot of frustration, confusion, hurt. That particular word has been used against me before as an insult and is especially being used against me now. It's been used against people I care about, and it presumes like a lack of intelligence or emotional control, which is not at all things that I want associated with me, things I want associated with my disability. They don't reflect on my life at all. And trust me, if people had to actually live with spasticity, I don't think they'd be using that as an insult, because it hurts.
Toby, are you particularly a Beyonce fan, or?
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
Huge,
Did that change your view of her music when you heard that word? And we don't want to repeat that word because it's completely unnecessary to repeat it. But when you heard that,
yeah, I think the same as Hannah as well. I was confused because we all just saw what happened with Lizzo, and I just thought there's not a chance that no one in her team, she worked with so many people, and not one person stood up and said, hold up, you don't use that word. It baffles me, and I still love her, but, you know, it does, you know, it takes its toll.
It also goes to representation, doesn't it? Can I bring Jenny and Sarah in here as well? Sarah, you know, you look around at the lack of representation in Parliament, and the Greens are the only person with someone with a visible disability, Jordan Steele-John, in the Parliament, and I think the point was made by you, Hannah, about the minister and who the minister is, and that the minister doesn't actually represent your community.
See, when people have to make decisions about marginalised communities, it's my view that the person who's making the decisions should probably be a part of that marginalised community. Just a hunch that maybe lived experience should count for something. And I think, while obviously there are multiple barriers to people with disabilities' political participation, the fact that there is only one senator in the whole of the history of Australian Parliament who has had a visible disability, and the fact that they then had to make changes to Parliament House that they weren't making before, shows me just how far we have to go. Now, that's not to say that other parliamentarians don't have invisible disabilities or disabilities that they haven't disclosed, but obviously we can only act on what we know, and what we know is Jordan Steele-Johns is the only disabled parliamentarian. And I think all of that comes down to the fact that, like, people with disabilities don't see themselves anywhere. There's two narratives you get taught about as a disabled person growing up. One of them is Paralympic excellence. It happens every 4 years. These people pop up and they do a great job. I am as much a fan of Dylan Alcott, Kurt Fernley, all of those guys as anyone else. I think they're incredible. But newsflash, not every disabled person is good at sport. Not every disabled person wants to go to the Paralympics. Not every disabled person could have a hit with Dylan Alcott and come away with a silver medal. The other narrative we get is a narrative of tragedy. How many times have you guys seen like a drink driving or a speeding ad where basically the thing they want to show you to deter you from doing that is a person in a wheelchair who thinks their life is over?
Wow. Hannah, I think you've just created a whole lot of thought right now across the country. I really do. And that is the kind of leadership that we need to hear from people who have lived experience. It's one of the reasons why I think, and I know Senator Steele-John is pushing for this quite hard. There's a couple of vacancies at the moment in relation to the NDIS, the chairperson and the CEO. Those positions should be being actively filled by people with lived experience so that they can show that leadership. And I just want to say one of the best things from my experience and my learning in relation to people's watching vicariously through the lived experience is being there with Jordan in the Parliament and having to see how he still has to navigate just physically the place, let alone emotionally and socially when people simple things like when we have to stand to speak, he can't get the President's attention. We're often having to kind of wave and say, well, Jordan has something to say. Across the board, it's every day there is another challenge. And having somebody with lived experience right there next to you is a very good way of teaching the rest of us.
Jenny?
I wanted to say thanks for your intervention now and over the last couple of weeks, because that is really powerful. Yes. And
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, it means a lot. I think we are going through a really interesting, big public discussion, and it's been important in the Parliament, but also, of course, it's been important in the community. A big discussion about who is represented and how, and who occupies authority and who gets to speak. It's been one of the most interesting and transformative conversations that I've witnessed in an adult life, where I have been quite interested in politics since, leaving school. The lived experience of a whole range of people who have not previously been represented is immensely important. I know Labor actually went to the election with a range of things that we hoped to do in relation to the NDIS. One of them was to return lived experience to the centre of its administration, in board, in senior executive positions. And you're right that there are vacancies there at the moment, and the Minister, Bill Shorten, is going through a selection process, but he's been very clear that he wants to see lived experience reflected more strongly.
That will be reflected? There is a likelihood, do you think, that someone will be appointed to those positions with lived experience?
He's going through a proper process of selection, but he's made it very clear that lived experience matters, and there's a range of opportunities to introduce it into the administration of the NDIS, and I know that the Minister is looking at those. More particularly, though, the whole system needs to be more responsive to the people who are using it.
Yes, please.
It was established to offer choice and control, and over recent years, those features of the system have been eroded.
You've led us through our journey. Thank you.
My apologies.
Hannah, thank you so much for what you said there as well.